Hey everybody, it's Winter with the Shift Spotlight, and today I'm here with Joseph Valentic. He's the founder of the Catholic Curator. He's a bit different of a guest that we have on the show today, so I'm kind of excited to dive in and see what you do, see how you do it. But before we do that, let's start out with give us an interesting fact about you that people may not know.
Well, I am blessed to have seven children, and we have a good friend of mine called it Valentic 1.0 and Valentic 2.0. We have four ranging from 22 to 32, and then we have three from 18 down to 11. So it's
Oh,
quite the
wow.
span, and five girls and two boys, and then also five grandchildren. So we are
Oh, wow.
blessed, shall we say?
Very, very blessed. That's amazing. Well, big families can be fun. I come from a big family, so I get it.
Yeah, that's great.
I have five brothers and sisters. Well, four brothers and one sister, and a sister. My sister's name is Summer. My name is Winter. My parents thought that would be hilarious. And then my brother is having his second child, one of them, and he's naming her Autumn. So we will now add that to the family mix.
Outstanding. Then you know what it's like. Yeah, I think we had near 40 people at our house for Christmas Eve. And
Yeah, huge.
between, you know, probably the most beautiful thing about it, though, was the realization that we had four generations under the
That's
roof,
cool.
which is really a cool,
That's very
cool
cool.
thing.
Yeah. Okay, so at a high level, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at the Catholic Curator?
So the Catholic Curator is very much kind of my passion project. My mother is famous for still saying at the age of 70 something that she doesn't figure out what she wants to be when she grows up, right? And I think all of us have that part of us that even though we have our duty bound job and our work and things, and hopefully what we're passionate about integrates, but sometimes it doesn't. And I'm the same way. 30 some odd years in business, I've sat in a variety of seats from outside service people to executives to CEOs, CFO, board seats, et cetera. And I've used a lot of different talents, shall we say, over time. But over the course of my career, as we get to know ourselves better, I began to see that I really had a passion for helping people. And it didn't necessarily always fit within a business mold. It was really more of a personal, like, and part of that stemmed out of, I'll call it the personal development passion that a lot of CEOs and executives have, right? We consume book after book after book of how to think and grow rich, et cetera, right? All these different things that we can do, and what happened over my life is I began to see that a calling, shall we say, that if I could integrate my faith more into my business, not from a wear my faith on my sleeve perspective, but how could that help me to actually be the best person I could be in business and and
Mhm.
and be more successful, if you will, not in an opportunistic way per se, but still being the best I could be. And out of that, over the last couple of years, I've come to learn that, well, I've accumulated a fair bit to share, and I enjoy sharing it. And I
Right.
enjoy particularly sharing it, not only speaking, but also from a writing perspective. I've not been a writer for my career, but I've written extensively throughout my work and life, and I've come to make a more serious dent in that in the past couple of years with blogs and very, very active on LinkedIn and trying to share these different things in writings. And so the curator becomes kind of a platform to be able to collect those things and share them with people.
Right.
But I'm also hoping over time that it'll become a place where people will gather over time and be able to help share their experiences of how do we integrate faith and business and get better in both. It's not either or, and that's kind of the key message of the curator is pursuing success is not bad. It's the right
Mhm.
thing to do if we're doing it for the right reasons, right? If we're doing it for selfish reasons and just simply to accumulate wealth and who cares about everybody else, not so much. But if we're doing it for the fact of growing and helping others and using all of our talents and abilities to the best we can be, that's absolutely wonderful thing to do. And it's aligns great with our faith. So that's kind of the origins, shall we say, of the Catholic Curator.
And so you said you've spent a lot of time on personal development. Like, how did that background kind of push you into this direction? Because, you know, it sounds really great. Integrate your faith with your business. But the reality of the world we live in is, there's certain connotations associated with that. And
Oh, yeah.
there's judgments that people can pass. And so how did you decide to, break that mold, keep going forward on something that isn't probably considered taboo or standard, right?
Right, right. It's a great question. And as with all of our lives, one of the greatest success principles of all time is nobody takes leaps in anything they do. Everything that's truly successful comes in small steps, right? It's a decided pursuit of this. And so I don't even know how many 15, 20 years ago that I said about the pursuit of trying to grow in personal development and consuming books.
Yeah.
And for many years, to be honest, those books gratified my ego more than I actually used them. It was just great to consume the knowledge. And oh, I read this book. I know that. I know this, and talk about it with people, but it wasn't internalizing. I
It's
read a
so
book along the
true.
way.
I mean, I just want to stop you right there. It's so true, that, and I appreciate you admitting that. And I love your authenticity there because, I mean, there's so many books that we talk about reading, but how often do we actually take the time to implement them in our day-to-day life or business or whatever it is?
So one of the books I read early on I read the whole book and my response was, "Hey, amen, awesome." But I really didn't implement it for 15 years later. And that book was a book called The Rhythm of Life by an author named Matthew Kelly. And
Mm,
in that book, he talked about the reality that we are created mind, body, and soul. And if
mm,
all we ever do is focus on our body, our mind, or our career, we are not going to be the best we could be in that particular vein because we're letting part of us go unattended, right? And we were made to be holistically working together. And so those seeds were planted, and along the way, that kind of kept coming back to me as a benchmark test of, well, am I really integrating all that I can be, right? That same author, years later, before I started my first business 6 years ago, I kind of went on a pursuit of who am I? What are my talents? What are my abilities? Many of us grow up in the corporate world very candidly. Hey, I got to go to college. I got to get a job. Well, that job pays well. I can do it. Let's just go do it. And there's a zero question of, is that really my best abilities and who am I supposed to be, right? But we need a
right.
job, and so we do it, right? So later in life, I said, okay, it's time for me to really think about who I am. So I went through different personality tests. Some of the stuff that actually aligned well with some of my EOS journey too, like Clifton Strength Finder, the Colby
Yeah.
Index, all these different things.
Right.
And from them, I began to think and see and shape and hear echoes of things that people had told me over the years, but I wasn't really fully utilizing. But
Mm,
then there came the real question, and it came from a Matthew Kelly book. As I was going through all these things, and everyone kept saying, go with your strengths, go with your strengths. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking, but don't I have to ask what my weaknesses are? Don't I have to actually stop and don't they matter? Should I do something with them? Sure enough, I read a Matthew Kelly book, and that's the exact question he says. He says, if all we ever do is focus on building on our strengths, then we have permanently plateaued. Because
mm,
essentially, you're for already operating at the highest you can, there really is not much marginally you can do. The only way to really change is to look at what's holding you back and see what
mm.
you can do to address that. And so that
I'm
opened
digging
the
this.
door.
I like love this kind of reverse process here because, yeah, we all know what we're super strong at, and that's what we talk about all the time, but there's a blind spot that we're obviously missing, and that's kind of the key.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the juice, meat, and potatoes are, right?
100%, right? And that's also where I find in my life, that's where the Lord wants to test us to grow too, right? Because it's scary. It's scary to go out and say I've got to admit that, or I'm going to really address that, especially if you openly discuss it with anybody. It's right. It's like that's wait a minute, you're talking about your weaknesses. You're going to do what? That's not
Right.
something people are comfortable with. But that thought process led me to say, okay, well, so what am I not doing well? What am I not doing right? Or here's another key thing too. Many of us can be very successful in life, relatively speaking, and never really fully utilize our own abilities in terms of taking those risks with them, if you will, right? We get comfortable in a
Right.
mediocrity, right? And
Yes.
so part of our downfall can be, yeah, I'm partially using my abilities,
I would say
but
mediocrity and security, right? A lot of times security keeps us in mediocrity.
Absolutely, right? And so I began to feel tested and kind of called to say, okay, where am I doing that? And for years, I had heard people tell me, "Man, you're a great writer. You're a great strategist. You know, you have this ability to integrate things, and and none of these things led themselves to like an immediate, oh yeah, I can make $1 million doing that tomorrow, right?
Right,
All
right.
these were different pieces, parts, right? So the journey continued though, and the key thing was is I kept studying, but then I started to add the prayer into it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what am I supposed to be doing? What
Mm-hmm.
don't I see? Who am I and who should I be? And a real tough question to ask sometimes is, okay, God, who do you want me to be? You made me, you had something in mind. What is that? And at least in my journey, I found that that doesn't get revealed all at once. And because there's so many teaching moments along the way, and again, we don't go from 0 to 100 in one step. There's
Yeah.
steps along the way. And so the more I journeyed down that path, Winter, the more I started to realize, again, if we just take the concept that we're body and soul, if I walk into the door of work every day and all I'm doing is using my intellect and my physical and my body, and I completely leave this piece over here, then just analytically, that's like taking a V8 and saying I'm only going to use two cylinders. You're not using the fullness of who you are. Of course, nobody teaches us how to do that either, right? It's not very common. I mean, and
Yeah.
it's, so how do I do that? What does that mean? Does that mean I got to go into work and I got to walk in with my Bible and start thumping people? No. The first piece of discovery is about who are you meant to be, and if you're not living that fully, then you're not serving your employer, you're not serving your family or your business, whatever it might be. And so there's
Right.
been this journey of discovering that the more I opened up to prayer, the more I opened up to trying to discern that, I found that I could use the skills that I had in different ways. Um, that's the other piece that's kind of amazing, right? If you just think about this for a second, if we're operating at 100% of our capacity and our strengths, we still are infinitely below anything God can do in our lives.
Right.
So the moment
Right.
we add one little modicum of prayer, anything can happen, right? And I'll never forget when I started my first business 6 years ago, the Growth Advocate. It was literally after a 54-day intentional prayer process of saying, "What do you want me to do?" I was with a company that was failing, and it was like, and I wasn't sure what the next step in my career was going to be. And I had all these thoughts in my head about I know I'm being called to do something different, but with a big family, the idea of starting a business was, that's not what I
Yep.
wanted to do. And lo and behold, on the 54th day of this 54 prayer process, I got a sign that was just irrefutable, so much so that my wife just said, "Looks like we're starting a business." And I said, "Yep, I think we are."
Yeah.
And for the next 3 years, things happened to me, even though I'm relatively well networked and use LinkedIn pretty favorably. For 3 years, I got business after business, revenue after revenue opportunity, none of which I actively went after. I would have crazy things like people knock on my door in an office. I rent an office in a CPA's building. "Hey, we heard you do this. Do you do that?" "Yeah." And it was a great client.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing stuff happened that no matter how hard I could physically try, I couldn't have found that person if I marketed and went after it. And I'm not saying we don't use marketing and tools. We absolutely have to. It's part of the process.
Right.
But when we intersect that with faith, it opens the door to possibilities we can't see and we can't arrange, right? So that kind of it really started to explode that journey.
And it's I love hearing this because, we work with a lot of CEOs and visionaries, and what we do at GCE Strategic Consulting, and also like who I have on the show here on the Shift Spotlight, which this is sponsored by GCE. And we see the burnout. We
Mm,
see their, stress, and we see them focus on the business, 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 but very few take care of the soul. And when you say for you it's God, faith, prayer, whatever, for somebody it might be Allah, meditation, yoga. It's to each their own. But it's something that I really feel we are in this like transformative time right now, where you can't ignore the soul anymore. You can't ignore that part of you, especially if you're running a company now, because all of the people underneath you, they're on board with it.
Yeah.
Especially if you have younger employees for that matter, and you have, some of these younger generations that are all about like quality of life and experiences versus like the almighty dollar. And so it's, I really feel like this podcast came at the perfect time, start of a new
Yes.
year. January, you're the first podcast of the year. And I think people really need to hear this and implement it with what they're doing in their companies and think about this as part of their business plan. How do they want to show up? And how does their soul want to represent and what they're doing at work too, whatever that looks like.
And one of the things for me that I've discerned as part of my calling is I've got the ability to take things that are kind of lofty, et cetera, and break them down into practical, applicable things. And so faith is just not some netherworld concept out there that I'm just kind of saying, oh, I sprinkle some fairy dust on it and something happens. No, I take a practical approach to how do I use this? How do I break my day up where I can take time to pray and reflect, openly on this or just a short burst here and there? How do I actually pursue learning more about how to integrate this? And so, for example, 2 years ago, I joined a fellowship program that was a year-long fellowship with a group called Cent Ventures. And it was quite the commitment because they expected you to commit to meet once every other week for an hour and a half. Half the meeting was on business and half the meeting was on faith. And to do
Mm,
it for a year, and it was also
yeah.
not cheap necessarily either, right? And it came at just the right time. I was just at this time of, okay, I know I need more. And candidly, it came at a time where I needed other people to help me more than me helping other people. I'd done a
Mhm.
lot of it, it's like, and so I was kind of cautious about this going, well, I don't want to be the old guy in the group that is just helping everybody. I do that all day long. I need someone to inform and I need to learn and grow. And over the course of that year, it was amazing. Piece by piece, ideas I had got shot down. New things came up that I didn't expect. In the middle of that, in prayer at mass one day came the idea, write a book, how to become a saint by succeeding in business. Now that sounds kind of funny. Hey, you're gonna become a saint by succeeding in business? How does that happen, right? Well, it's not about financial success. It's not about building and accumulating wealth. It's about being the best you can be, which you can't be if you're not looking at yourself holistically, right? So again, it's
Right.
how do we do this practically? And so that's kind of one of my personal passions is to look at. I can look big picture with you. We can talk visionary. On the EOS scale, I am like right on the cusp between integrator and visionary. I'm like just below visionary, and so it's I can walk and talk and chew bubble gum with all the visionaries out there.
Yep.
But
Yep.
then I can turn around and I can say to them, okay, but now let's make this real. A, B, if you give me permission to be honest with you, I will be, and I'll press you for some tough questions, right? And then part of this process, something else happened that was fascinating, was I discovered Pat Lencioni's Working Genius.
Hmm.
And are you familiar with that at all?
No, I don't think I've heard that one.
So Lencioni, he's one of the great authors that is used in EOS, with his books, the five dysfunctions of a team, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. So he created this analysis called the working genius because in his own company, in his own life, despite his great success, his employees kept coming to him and saying, why are you so grumpy? You're famous, you're successful, you got money. And he's like, that's a good question, and they started looking at it. And what he learned is he said, I was spending more time in my business on things that I was competent at,
Yeah.
but not that were my working genius.
Yeah.
And so they created this analysis that came up with 6 different working geniuses where no one is better than the other. Okay,
Hmm.
they all serve a different purpose and different function. And everybody has 2 primary, 2 that you are competent at, and 2 that really frustrate you.
Yep.
Well, guess where most CEOs operate in? Between the competency and the irritation.
Yes, that's 100% true. 100% true.
Right. And so this was like an epiphany for me. And I've taken all these profiles and tests and whatever. In my 2 working geniuses were wonder and discernment. Okay. And together, they created a persona that was called the contemplative counselor. And for the first time in my life, I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
That's who I am. It just described me to a T. And again, this happened while I was doing all this prayer stuff, right? So
Mhm.
again, it's I'm learning tools of the trade and learning new things that are not just spiritual. Some of them are functional business tools. And so that's kind of my passion for the curator is thus the name curate. How do we curate things that help us do both? It's so on my website, you'll see me talk about working genius, because that's again, for me, it was a profound element, but I think for every business owner, it's amazing. And then when
Yeah.
when a CEO takes it and has their team take it, then you look at it and say, well, what's the team makeup like? Oh,
Yep.
interesting. We don't have this kind of person. For example, one of Lencioni's customers was in software development. 5 years they hadn't developed a new product, but they were making
Yep.
a ton of money. Well, they found out that nobody on their executive team had the discernment of wonder that was in their product development. So nobody said, well, what if we do this? What if we change that? Except for their corporate attorney.
Interesting.
They made him chief product officer, and the company just started innovating and doing great things. Crazy, right?
That's
So
funny.
again, that
That's
just shows,
that's the attorney that probably just went into, becoming an attorney because he had a law degree to go make the money, but he never questioned himself and said, "What do
yep,
I really love to do?" And he was really
100%.
a creator.
100%. And it shows how not just people, but companies can get into this role of, operating in this middle ground as opposed to what we really optimally should operate in.
Yeah, yeah. So, this is great, and I think you have a lot of wisdom and knowledge that goes beyond even faith-based. So, if somebody listening wanted to take the next step with you or wanted to talk to you,
Yeah.
maybe something may have struck the chord, what should they do? How should they reach you?
Yeah. Please email me at joe@catholiccurator.com. And there's two C's there in the middle, Catholic Curator, but it's all together.com. You can also go to the website, catholiccurator.com, and take a look around and see some of my posts and blogs. And the on LinkedIn, I'm one of only two Joe Valentics in the world that I know of, so it's
Oh, good.
pretty easy to find me.
Yeah.
And people there can also get a taste for, as you said earlier, it's like, God, it's almost 2 years ago now. Well, anyways, during writing the book, there was a chapter that I wrote on a mother and a father, a husband and a wife. They were both entrepreneurs, and they both became saints. They made a ton of money, and yet they had this holy life, holy kids. So I wrote this chapter in the book, and I thought I should post that on LinkedIn. Everyone talks about how do we have it all, right? And boy, oh boy, the temptation not to post it was big. No, 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 don't put that out there, not on LinkedIn. I put that out there, Winter, and in a week I had 12,000 views of that post.
Wow, that's
Bam.
amazing.
And to me, that was God kind of prompted me going, you need to do more of this.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
just get it out there. And then 2 months later, I did a post on another saint named Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who even though he was a priest, he also designed a working spaceship. I mean, he was just a genius. And I said Elon Musk has nothing on Maximilian Kolbe. And I'm sure that name helped my ratings. But in 2 weeks, I had 55,000 views of that.
Wow.
So it's people are hungry. They
Yeah.
want to know these things, right? So
And they want original content that may be different than what they have been reading, and that's coming from your passion, right? And that's coming from like only you have this one voice. So
thank
you're
you.
doing great things, and we appreciate it.
You used the word authentic earlier, and that's really what I try to be, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I have no desire to make things up just to make this post look cute or that. No, it's yeah, like it or not, here's Joe.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Well, I love this podcast.
Thank
I
you.
think it's a really special message for us to share today. And we super appreciate you coming on the show today.
I really appreciate the opportunity offer, and I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. I mean, it is so necessary. So thank you very much.
Thank you.